Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Crypto Talk. Over 700 people registered for today's talk from countries like Canada, the US, in Europe, and really all around the world. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time and joining us. My name is Alex Tapscott, Managing Director of Ninepoint Digital Asset Group and co-author and editor of the new book, Digital Asset Revolution, which was actually just released yesterday. Crypto asset markets have lost around $2 trillion in value since their peak late last year. Predictably, some in the mainstream media have dusted off their Bitcoin obituaries. And to be sure, the breakdown in prices has been painful if you have a short-term time horizon. But don't let the crypto price tail wag the Web3 and crypto dog. Look beyond the daily market gyrations, and you'll see that the foundations are being laid here for a new internet and financial industry built with Bitcoin, blockchain, and other digital assets. This is really the most important computer science innovation in a generation, the first digital medium for value, a way to move, store, and manage assets like money, stocks, votes, and even our digital identities privately and peer-to-peer. Having lived through a few myself, crypto winters are always the best time to drill down on these core concepts, do the work, and build for the future. As they say, bull markets are for earning and bear markets are for learning, but really the truth is fortunes are made in bear markets. So today I expect we're going to be learning a lot because joining us is Tim Draper, one of the most influential, successful, and prolific venture capitalists alive today. Tim is a supporter and global thought leader for entrepreneurs everywhere and is a leading spokesperson for Bitcoin, blockchain, ICOs, and cryptocurrencies, and has invested in over 50 crypto companies and led investments in Coinbase, Ledger, Tezos, Bancor, and many others. In addition to being one of the crypto industry's biggest backers, as an investor, he has funded some of Silicon Valley's marquee companies, including Skype, SpaceX, Twitter, and many more. And he's the inventor of viral marketing, which really laid the groundwork for social media crowdsourcing and growth hacking. So Tim knows a thing or two about making big contrarian bets. And I'll just tell one quick story before we jump in. Back in 2014, at a time when Bitcoin was trading about 45% off its all-time highs, Tim made another big contrarian bet, submitting the winning bid ultimately and beating out many others for 30,000 Bitcoins at an auction held by the US Marshal Service, paying about $565 per Bitcoin at the time. In retrospect, this was, a legendary trade, but Tim's investment was initially a losing one, as Bitcoin traded down or sideways for nearly 2 years. But he took the long view and was rewarded for his vision and his patience. So Tim has a knack for seeing what's coming around the corner, and that's why I'm so excited for this conversation. So let's just dig right in. Tim, thank you for joining Crypto Talks and welcome.
Alex, thanks so much for having me here, and congratulations on your book, The Digital Asset Revolution. I mean, it's happening. We're in the middle of it, and all revolutions come in fits and starts, and we're going to see a lot of fits and starts here, and particularly when you're dealing with the currency of a society. You're going to see a lot of people wanting the old way, fighting for the old way and hanging on to it, and a lot of people pushing forward and growing this new world. And clearly you are one of those people pushing this thing forward. And so I'm very excited about what you're doing, and I'm excited about doing it myself.
Well, that's a humbling thing to hear from you. It really is. And you mentioned it comes in fits and starts, and people talk about how the market's off a little, but today the value of this asset class is around $1 trillion. And when you first started looking at this, which was even before I started looking at this, it was a lot smaller. But from the outset, what I've always found remarkable is just how strong your conviction has been around Bitcoin and this underlying technology. So why don't you maybe just, if you can start us off by telling us a bit about how you first discovered Bitcoin and what really convinced you that this was a game changer?
Well, it's interesting. A long, long time ago, 2003 or 2004, I was talking to somebody from Korea, and he said, "Yeah, in Korea we're all playing this game, and it's called, I think it was Lineage, I think." And I said, "Well, that's great." And he said, "Yeah, half of Korea plays this game." And I said, "Oh, wow, really?" He said, "Yeah, and I just paid a guy to be my avatar while I'm at work." And I thought, whoa, so he's living this extra life and he wants to make sure he wins in this virtual life while he also wins in his real life. And so I started to think about virtual life. And then he said, and I bought my son a sword for his birthday. And I thought, well, that seemed like a non sequitur. And he said, no, it's a sword. It's pixels on the screen. And I'm paying $40 so my son can have a sword that is pixels on the screen so he can fight a battle in this game. And I started to think digital money right there. And I thought, this is going to be interesting. Not only are people going to use fiat money to buy digital goods, they'll use digital money to buy fiat goods. It's going to go back and forth. And so I thought that it would be game to game. How digital currency would work would be game to game. But then Bitcoin showed up, and it was so genius. The idea that people would have a decentralized platform, so multiple checks on this blockchain that made it so that everyone could trust the system. In fact, you can trust the system more than you can trust a banker or a government official. And the idea that you can trust this system of money that could now be global and open, and it can keep perfect records and transparent. So I got all excited about it, and I bought about 40,000 Bitcoin for about $4 each. And then I did that through this company called CoinLab. I invested in CoinLab and I bought some Bitcoin. And CoinLab put all that Bitcoin in Mt. Gox. And I lost all the Bitcoin. And I thought, well, I've lost money with entrepreneurs before. I threw up my hands and thought, too bad. That was kind of an interesting currency experiment. And it turned out that I thought that was the end of Bitcoin. I thought, well, gee, if the biggest trading platform disappears all the money, this is worthless. But it turned out Bitcoin only dropped about 10 or 15% on the news of Mt. Gox's fiasco. And I thought, whoa, people really care about this. There are people out there that really need it. And so I did a deep dive, and I went out and I tried to figure out what people were using Bitcoin for. And it turned out they were using it for remittance, sending money overseas to employees, buying things from people who didn't have bank accounts. And there were so many interesting uses that were really human mission critical that I thought, wow, I need to do something about this. And then when the marshal's office had that auction, it turned out I paid, the market for it was $6.18 at the time, and I paid $6.32. And I think that's right. Anyway, I paid over market for it. And by paying over market, I thought, well, either this thing transforms the world, or it was not a great investment. And I thought, well, if it transforms the world, it's going to be worth a lot more than $6.32. And if it doesn't, then I've lost my investment anyway. And I won the auction, but I didn't only win one of the lots. I won all 9 lots. So I won more than I wanted. But once I realized that I had won them all, because I think everybody else bid below market for the U.S. Marshal's Office Bitcoin. And then Bitcoin, just went right down for about 2 years to about $180. And I thought, oh boy, this is too bad. But I kind of thought they're missing the point. And this is not a speculative stock. It is a new currency that transforms all of the economy of the entire world. It's going to be worth a lot. And so I even bought more at 180. There was another marshal's office auction. And then I made a prediction that Bitcoin would hit 10,000. That was in 2014, that it was at 180. And I looked pretty crazy. I said Bitcoin's going to hit 10,000 by 2017. And I did it on air on Fox Business News. And she looked at me like I was out of my mind. And then 3 years later, she got me back on the show and said, "You were right." And so since then, it dropped back down to 4,000. And I made another prediction of 250,000 by the end of 2022 this year, or early 2023. And I'm sticking with it. I think we've got a major transformation happening in the world. And once the retailers of the world recognize that they can save about 2.5% every time somebody swipes a card, they are going to say, "We accept Bitcoin." And once that happens, then the shoppers, 80% of the retail is controlled by women. And women only are about 1 out of 14 Bitcoin wallets, or they used to be. Now it's 1 out of 6 Bitcoin wallets. All those Bitcoin wallets are going to start up because they're going to get better deals by shopping with Bitcoin. And then when I can get my food, my clothing, and my shelter all in Bitcoin, I am going to have no reason to hold on to fiat currency. And hopefully the government by then will accept taxes in Bitcoin too. So by then, there'll be no reason to have government currency, because government currency generally decreases in value over time. It is inflationary. It is not positive. It's not positive to hold on to. And so people will run from government currency to Bitcoin, and we're going to see like a run on the dollar. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen. And it's going to be like when I remember my dad giving me $1 million of currency from the South. What was that? Confederate money. And I thought, wow, $1 million of Confederate money. What can I buy with this? And he goes, well, you can't buy, it's not worth the paper it's printed on, because the Union took over the mint. And so Confederate dollars became completely worthless.
Yeah.
I sort of see the same thing happening with fiat currency. It's all, it's already happened with the drachma and the franc and whatever the French franc and whatever Cyprus's currency was. And now you're seeing countries where they don't have great confidence in their government, recognizing that the best way to build confidence is to make Bitcoin a national currency. And so you see El Salvador, the Central African Republic, Ukraine, Japan, way back when, are all making Bitcoin a national currency. So there's this new...
Making legal tender, you mean, right?
Yeah, well, national currency, and in all cases, a parallel national currency.
Yeah. Well, it's such an interesting thing. Like the first time you made a bet on Bitcoin, 40,000 Bitcoin for $4. I mean, that was, seems like kind of a shot at something new. And if it worked out, great. And if not, it wasn't, a ton of money. But the next time with the Marshalls, I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars. So these were high conviction bets that you were making at a time when I think it was probably, at the time, a lot of people were writing Bitcoin off, to your point, right? As maybe a failed monetary experiment. But obviously you saw that there was this strong community. And I think you said human mission critical uses where people were actually using it. And, your point about fiat currency is really interesting, because I think people, our audience probably for this call is a lot of Canadians, a lot of Americans. And, the collapse of a fiat currency might not seem like an obvious or near-term possibility. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But in other parts of the world, it's the reality that people live with every single day. And I was actually speaking yesterday to an African-Canadian entrepreneur who's got 70 people in Nigeria. And he said that to a person, they would rather take Bitcoin than the local currency if they had a choice as their salary, or a US dollar stable coin, because it's got increased functionality and they just rather save their money in Bitcoin or dollars than in the local currency. And I think that's a phenomenon.
The Naira drops like 50% a year like clockwork.
Exactly.
The government just keeps printing them and they become worth less and less.
Yeah, and so the central bank in Nigeria reacted by trying to ban Bitcoin, right? And if you look at some of these measures of usage, I mean, you named some of those countries, but Bitcoin usage is higher in places like Nigeria and Ukraine than it is in places like the United States and Canada, because for those exact reasons, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Like, if you believe the world's going to become more unstable or the future is going to become more uncertain, it just, to me, puts a long-term bid under Bitcoin as an alternative form of money, for sure.
Yeah, definitely, it's a long-term. You're betting on an anthropological leap for society. It's like the equivalent of going from trading with shells to trading with gold, or gold to the promise of gold, or the full faith and credit of a government. It's the next big leap, and the world will become wealthier. Every time we have a leap in a currency, the world becomes wealthier. And with this currency, the idea of a currency that can be used anywhere in the world and keeps perfect records, that's never, and is not subject to the whims of any political force, that has never been done. And that is a major human breakthrough. This is going to be fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to a time when I can raise a fund all in Bitcoin, invest it all in Bitcoin, and then have the entrepreneurs pay their employees and suppliers all in Bitcoin, and have the entire thing in a walled garden of smart contracts where all the payments are done automatically through this system. And all the accounting is done without an accountant or a bookkeeper or an auditor or a transfer agent or a lawyer or whoever.
Yeah.
The overhead will be very low, and the contracts will be massive. So I think we're about to go through a major transformation, and people say, well, but it's so volatile. Why are you holding on to Bitcoin? It's so volatile. I say, look, I'm looking into the future, and in the future, one Bitcoin will be worth one Bitcoin. There are 21 million of them, and that's it. And all these other currencies are very volatile as they slowly disappear from our use. And you're going to see that volatility where, and you will. You'll continue to see that volatility as people slowly, and it'll be like the internet. The internet had that huge crash, and people thought that was the end, and nobody wanted to put their credit card on the internet. They didn't trust it and whatever, and privacy concerns and all those things. And then slowly but surely, Amazon, Apple, Facebook became trillion-dollar businesses, and they changed our lives. They made our lives so much better and easier. Amazon, oh my God, Amazon! I can ask for a toothbrush and it shows up in 4 hours. I mean, this is an amazing life that we have, and it was all because of the internet. And at the bust in the internet, like 2001, people thought Amazon was gone. They thought that was a worthless company, no reason to have it. And all the other dot bombs, they talked about dot bomb. So, when the press is for you and the people are all saying, yeah, we're all making money doing it, then it kind of gets hotter than it should get. And then it gets colder than it should get when they start beating on it. But then it becomes bigger than any of us ever imagined at the time. And I believe that's happening in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And think of all the technologies that are going to come off of Bitcoin, NFTs, smart contracts, DeFi, all of these things. They're going to completely transform not just banking, but finance, insurance. I think governments are going to change. My God, you could have the most efficient government if it were all, and you'd have a government of happier people if you sort of let the markets be free and allow people to create DAOs, because I think DAOs could really change things. But I could imagine a government all wrapped around Bitcoin where I don't need to worry. The taxes are paid automatically. The accounting doesn't have to be complicated, and if it is complicated, it's all done in software. The system can be put together in a very orderly, systematic way. It can be really exciting. And DAOs, I mean, the fact that the U.S. government is so slow to allow for all these things, or kind of sits up there with laws they created 80 years ago that they're somehow are supposed to be relevant to today. They're stopping us from really transforming society in a very positive way. So let me talk about DAOs for a second.
Yeah, well, actually, Tim, maybe while you're talking about DAOs, like I want to sort of, if you could talk about DAOs, but also some of the other big innovations related to crypto that you're really interested in, because it's so, like, in your initial story where you explained how you got interested in this, it was a digital asset that sparked your kind of curiosity. And what's so interesting about blockchain is that it's the basis for all kinds of different kinds of digital assets, right? And not just assets themselves, but new markets and economic models and organizations like DAOs. So we know from my intro, I said that you funded 50 plus crypto ventures, protocols, companies. So yeah, love to talk about DAOs, but also I'd love to just hear, beyond Bitcoin, what are some of the big things that you're so excited about?
So the reason I keep pushing Bitcoin is I've got a lot of it, but also because to me, it reminds me of Microsoft, where Microsoft said, okay, we'll just be a platform and then allow all these apps to be created. And they had all these apps, clip art and games and whatever else. And then Microsoft decided that some of those apps became very big, like WordPerfect was getting very big, and Lotus 1-2-3 and PowerPoint. And so they basically created their own Word package, their own Excel spreadsheet, and bought PowerPoint. I think the same thing will ultimately happen with Bitcoin, where Bitcoin will be the platform for NFTs, for DeFi, for whatever. But I also like all of these innovations that are happening. I mean, Tezos figured out how to do a low energy token and one that was tied to proof of stake instead of proof of work, which costs less in the way of energy. And then they focused on smart contracts, and that has been a big deal. Aragon has kind of created a jury system, a crypto jury system, where governance and voting and juries and whatever can all be done through this new system. A lot of interesting tokens have done, a lot of people behind tokens have done some really interesting things.
Yeah.
But the reason I like the DAO is there's this, in our society, there's this schadenfreude. They say, Jeff Bezos shouldn't be that rich. And they say that, and then and you say, why? I mean, the guy's created Amazon, and Amazon's made our lives so much better. And all of those contracts that he's done with all of us and delivered so many goods to so many people, he should be honored. But people have a little of that schadenfreude, and they say, oh, no, he's too rich, whatever. Well, if Amazon weren't just for the good of shareholders, but for a DAO. The DAO could be shared with the community, with the suppliers, with the early customers. It doesn't just have to be for the normal people who become shareholders, the employees and the investors and the founders. It can be for everyone. And so everybody benefits. I mean, everyone does benefit from Amazon and from Bezos being so wealthy. Everybody benefits. He pays a lot of taxes. He does a lot of good things for a lot of people. His business does extraordinary things, but people don't. They still feel that schadenfreude. They would feel a lot better if they were DAO token holders of Amazon.
Yeah.
Once a company goes public,
before you go on, I'm mindful of our audience and their knowledge level. So just for everyone who's listening, DAO stands for Distributed Autonomous Organization. It's basically a new kind of entity that allows you to raise capital and direct resources towards something, kind of like a company, but instead of having a small group of shareholders, everyone can participate in the value that's created. Sorry, go ahead.
And our SEC is saying, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Because of these laws that the SEC is stuck with, the 1933 Act and the 40 Act, that say that you can't create a public company without registering with the SEC. Whereas all these entrepreneurs come to the US and they want to start their businesses, well, then they find out that we have too many regulations here, and so then they'll start it in another country. In fact, I went to El Salvador and I was jealous, or I didn't go to El Salvador. Sorry, they came and I met with them, all these people who worked with the president in El Salvador. And they said, they told me all the interesting things that they were doing with tokens and with Bitcoin and with NFTs and all the advances they'd made and all the entrepreneurs that were now moving to El Salvador. And I was jealous. I was thinking, oh my God, this used to be the Silicon Valley. This used to be the place where we could innovate and we could try anything and do anything. And now we've got regulators slapping us down before we get started. And so those entrepreneurs have to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so I'm well aware of how regulations can slap down countries.
And
when you have too much government control, you lose. You become North Korea or Cuba. You become a socialist, communist, Marxist, whatever government. And so governments have to realize that the freer the more they are trusting of their people and how much they can let their people go free, the more innovative their people will be. I mean, boy, you go through China today, ever since Xi took over, boy, they've just cracked down on everything and it's all government control. The people's souls have been sapped. They had so much spirit while Deng Xiaoping was kind of creating this new free market system. And now it's all like they've just sapped the souls of the Chinese people. So my tie, it's a Bitcoin tie. It says freedom and trust, and then Draper Associates. And I believe so much in like trust and freedom. I met with this great guy, Sri Ravi Shankar, and he has 500 million followers. He's a guru. And I told him about trust and freedom, and he said, trust, freedom, two sides of the same coin. You can't have freedom without trust. You can't have trust without freedom. And it got me thinking, and I thought, that guy, no wonder he's got 500 million followers.
Well, little known fact about Blockchain Revolution, the first book, is that the working title for the entire time we were writing it was actually called The Trust Protocol. And it was the idea that we don't need to rely on centralized institutions to act as trusted intermediaries. If we've got a shared network state, that everyone can see and it's transparent and it's immutable, then that can be the basis for all kinds of new economic interactions. Our publisher said, nobody knows what blockchain is, let alone the trust protocol. So call it blockchain, just don't bury the lead, basically, was what they said to us. But the trust protocol is really how I've always thought about it. I want to go back to the topic of DAOs because there's, you talk about all the benefits of a lot of big tech companies, but there's definitely been a backlash against those giants, especially in the social media side. I think less so against Amazon for all the obvious reasons that you've pointed out. And one of the arguments is that all of this data that we create in these applications, we create it, and yet it ends up, getting expropriated or used by these centralized platforms. And one of the promises of Web3, of crypto, is the idea that you can launch a new social network or a new kind of company or new organization as a DAO, and your early users and customers can become stakeholders, not stakeholders in the sense that, I got there first, but actually become economic stakeholders by earning tokens, I guess, a share of that project. And that's actually that economic flywheel or that incentive is way stronger than anything that we've kind of developed before as a way to kind of grow something virally. Do you believe in the potential of DAOs as the organizational structure to launch new kinds of ventures that could actually challenge those old tech giants?
Yes, I do. I think they're going to be really exciting. And I think that our government has to really shape up, and we need to allow this innovation to happen. We were lucky when the internet came. There were all these regulators trying to regulate the internet.
Yeah.
And the leadership at the time said, no, let's just see how it goes. And just by doing that, all of those amazing companies were created and grown in the U.S. Mm-hmm. If the U.S. had regulated them and taxed them and made them very difficult to get started, there would be no Amazon, there would be no, Facebook, no Twitter, no Apple. Apple would be probably regulated out of existence. We would have lost huge trillions of dollars of value if they had decided to regulate the internet. And I think all of that noise about regulating digital currencies is a mistake. I think they should say, we're going to let them create. Let's see how it goes. And let's wait for things to happen. More good things will happen than bad things. That's just
it's so interesting. You mentioned the internet. There was at one point in the 1990s, everyone was trying to understand, what is this thing, the internet? And it's sort of like the parable of the blind man and the elephant. Everyone's blind and they're touching a different part of the elephant.
I've got the trunk.
You got something different, right? And one proposal actually was, well, this is a broadcast medium, and what's it most like? Well, it's most like radio. So what we're going to require is anybody who wants to launch a website to get a CB radio license. That was something that was being seriously considered at the time. And thank goodness that it wasn't ever adopted, and that the internet was able to grow in an open and sort of unfettered way. Because imagine it was every hosted website needed a radio license. It would have been 150 websites rather than millions and all the benefits.
You hit on decentralization and how Twitter and Facebook have centralized, and Google centralized data, and Apple too, and that data should be owned by the individual or whatever. It turns out that now one of our big themes in the fund that I'm raising is we're looking for decentralization. we see decentralization as like the extension of Bitcoin and the extension of all these technologies that are happening today. Company called Unstoppable Domains allows anyone to go buy, you can buy an alex.crypto and you can put anything you want on there. And and so you get free speech for the world. You can't be muted by one political force or another. You can't be stopped. And so real debate happens, real value happens, and you own your data and it's right there. I think that is going to be a trend, and those unstoppable domains are selling like hotcakes because people can put whatever they want on them, and that I think the people who are trying to mute free speech are really destroying a society that has grown significantly. Free speech is probably our most, or if not one of the most important parts of the U.S. society, and the reason the U.S. has done so well over these 200 plus years. The ability to talk about it is so important. And if you start telling people they can't say certain words or certain things, or they're offended or whatever, so what? Be offended. And then let's talk about it. Let's debate. We'll learn. We'll both learn. And we'll come up with something better. And the Silicon Valley has been made of people who are willing to say things that other people weren't willing to say, willing to try things that other people weren't willing to try. And it's the envy of the world now. It's extraordinary what the Silicon Valley has done over the last 60 years.
Yeah.
Well, it's all a beautiful thing, and it's all based on freedom and trust.
Yeah. Well, there's some other examples too. There are distributed file sharing systems, networks, things like Filecoin or the Akash network that are helping to enable the kind of thing that you're talking about. For example, in Turkey, Wikipedia was hosted for a time on a centralized server, and the government, when people started updating, the Wikipedia pages for the government in power, for Erdogan, the president, the government shut it down. And so Wikipedia has moved over to Filecoin as a way to basically host the website on a decentralized network that can't be shut down. So again, this is technology that's being applied in the real world to sort of, I guess, freedom enabling uses, which obviously is a very good thing. You keep returning to this question of Silicon Valley and how it was the engine of innovation for a while. And during the internet boom, a lot of I think most internet connections were in the U.S. And most PC users and most VC firms and most internet companies, as a result, got founded there. And part of it, as you said, is the government, set the conditions for entrepreneurship to thrive by taking a lighter approach. But now we're in a world where technology is kind of all over the place. It's ubiquitous. Everyone's got access to smartphones. Sure. Everyone's got access to high-speed internet. And with these new funding, with these new organizations, DAOs and so forth, anybody can raise capital or create an organization. And the COVID pandemic has probably accelerated the decentralization of organizations where people can work from anywhere. You don't need to be in a physical place. So do you think, I think a lot of people just assume it's Silicon Valley's and the U.S.'s, opportunity to lose here. But it sounds like to me you're saying there's a much greater risk that the next generation of the internet, the next financial services, sector of the future might not be built in the U.S. or might not be built in the U.S. alone.
Yeah, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it were built in El Salvador or some country where they had nothing to lose. One of the poorest countries in the world, and they looked and said, well, why don't we just try this? And if a government regulates a technology out, it forces the people that live under that government into the dark ages. And for 40 years, you'll see, whoever wins this, whoever allows people to innovate around Bitcoin, the blockchain, smart contracts, DeFi, NFTs. The governments who allow that to happen freely and with trust are going to be 40 years ahead of the governments that lock it down. And so, like China, sure, they said, oh, okay, we're going to get rid of Bitcoin. Okay, we're going to get rid of the Bitcoin miners. By the way, stupidest move ever. But they got rid of the Bitcoin miners, and that was like 40% of the mining capacity in the world just disappeared. In China, my God, what is that guy thinking?
Yeah, but pop back up in
government control.
Yeah,
and he was, I've got to control everything, and so he basically has ruined it. He's disassembling one of the potentially great economies of the world. And 40 years from now, the people in China are going to be poor again. And it's because this guy is locking them down. And he's locking them down in every way possible. No Bitcoin mining, no cryptocurrency unless it's government controlled. And then he's actually physically locking them down. And I mean, I'm laughing, but it's ruining the lives of millions, maybe 1 billion people. And he's doing it. It's just wrong. And in the U.S., I mean, fortunately, at least they're taking a slightly more balanced approach, allowing some innovation to happen and slapping down others. But the ones who are letting it rip, Malta, Switzerland, and those countries are going to thrive. They are going to rock and roll. Uruguay is just going to be a barn burner. Because they're allowing this stuff to happen. They're sort of saying, hey, we don't know what's going to happen, but we know this is new technology. It's good for society. It's going to open up more economic value. Let's do it.
Yeah, well, a lot of projects still are employing a lot of people and building in the U.S. not because of the government or whatever, but probably in spite of it, because of all the other benefits that the U.S. has, right? But then there's all these other countries that don't have any of those other benefits, and they've got to figure out a way to attract capital and talent and innovation so that they can be a leader in this new industry. And it doesn't have to be the Uruguays of the world. Even middle power countries or mid-sized economies like Canada's, for example, we've got a robust tech and financial industry here, but nobody needs to be in, a Canadian city to build a great global business, right? The way maybe they needed to in the past to be in some place like Silicon Valley. So, our government needs to do what it can to attract, to be a beacon and to be a magnet for that, right? And I think that's true of pretty much every country in the world, with the exception of the U.S., which can be a magnet in spite of its flaws because of everything else that it has going for it. We've got 15 minutes left here, Tim, and there are quite a few questions coming in from the audience. One person asks, how do you think Bitcoin and this technology is going to impact jobs? What kinds of jobs are going to be eliminated because of those efficiencies that you've described? What kinds of new jobs might be created? Can you shed some light on that question, please?
Yeah, I think it will free up a lot of people. I think bankers can become more of a consulting job. I think lawyers can sort of move to a higher plane. I think accountants can do more analysis on the numbers rather than having to just crank them all the time. I think bookkeepers probably won't be required. I think auditors, I don't think you're going to need auditors because I think the audit will be happening in real time on the blockchain. I don't think you're going to need transfer agents, because I think transfers are going to be automatic and right through the system. Carta already does this with shares of stock, but and then there are going to be other jobs created, because there are going to be a lot of innovations in finance. I think the entrepreneur and the venture investor are going to be closer together. There are going to be fewer people in between. I think that there are going to be, in insurance, I suspect that payments are going to be very automatic, so that you're going to pay right now you pay your premium, and then you issue a claim, and then you fight the insurance company. I think that a really good insurance company might show up that says, you pay your premiums, but you do it automatically goes into their Bitcoin wallets. And then when a claim, before you've even issued a claim, they send you a check, and they send you, not a check, they drop Bitcoin into your wallet, and they do it even before you know that your house is burned down, or that a hurricane has come through your house, or that an accident has happened, or whatever. It could happen before, because we've got such good surveillance. That surveillance could determine, it can anticipate that you're going to have a medical condition and immediately put money into your system. And I think that is the future of insurance. So that's going to change the entire insurance industry. I think all of finance is going to change. I think a huge part of our society is unbanked, and they will be banked with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And so I do think the banker has to reinvent themselves. And I think the Fed has to reinvent itself. I mean, I think the governments, various feds around the world are, what they do basically is control your currency and determine based on, they've got a dual mandate, which is keep inflation down and keep jobs up. And that job will change. And I think they're going to have to figure something out. And, I think actually overall, we probably need fewer government regulators, because a lot of that can happen just like through trust and freedom, and through and the blockchain is going to keep these perfect records, so we don't have to have so many watchdogs.
Yeah, one question that
I think the tax guy will go away. I don't think you're going to need the tax guy, because I think taxes will be built into the software.
Yeah. Well, the vision that you have for this idea of real-time accounting is actually really happening today. Every time you do a transaction in a digital asset, crypto asset, it creates an entry in a decentralized ledger that anyone can see and access. And a lot of the most valuable startups in this industry are actually companies that help to analyze and scrutinize on-chain data. To your point, they're not the ones grinding the numbers, because the numbers are all there. It's trying to take the data and make sense of it, to help organize information. And that's a higher order activity that I think is going to be hugely valuable. But you can, in traditional accounting,
that's like Etherscan or
Etherscan,
who does the accounting for all the Bitcoin.
Etherscan is a great example. It's like in the old world, accounting is something we do with the cycles of the moon or the changing of the leaves on the trees, every quarter. And, accounting should be something we can do in real time, a live snapshot of the health of an organization, of a DAO, of a protocol, instantly. You mentioned the point about the Fed, and there was a great question from the audience, and one that I wanted to ask too, which is, one of the biggest areas of growth in digital assets has been in stablecoins, which are digital assets pegged to, or crypto assets pegged to fiat currencies. And almost always it's the US dollar. And even though in the long run, these assets might marginalize fiat currencies, one of the ironies, at least for me, of this whole innovation boom is that it's actually been a way to export the US dollar. to parts of the world where people don't have access to banking. And this example about my Nigerian friend is a great one, which is his employees, the Gen Zers especially, anyone 25 and under, would love Bitcoin, but they'd also really love dollars, US dollars in stablecoin form. And I just, so fascinating that a lot of central banks around the world are concerned about this dollarization of their economies, swapping out of their local currency for dollars. And that weirdly, crypto and blockchain is actually helping that. So I just would love to get your take on stablecoins in general. And then there's sort of their offshoot, which is central banks issuing their own digital currencies. What are your views on these things?
Yeah, so I think stablecoins are a bridge to Bitcoin. And the reason I look at it that way is that stablecoins have the benefits of being something people are familiar with and having the ability to easily move to somebody's digital wallet. And that's a valuable thing. Well, what they don't have is the freedom from a government entity just willy-nilly printing more and creating inflation in the currency. And they don't have the decentralization. So they're subject to these political whims and they're centralized. So no matter what, whether the dollar is a digital dollar or a physical dollar or a credit dollar, it's still controlled by a Fed, and it's still at the mercy of political whims. If somebody decides they want to print a bunch of dollars, your dollars are worth less. That's just the way it is. Whereas no one can do that with Bitcoin. There are only 21 million, and that's it. So I do think that it's a nice stepping stone to Bitcoin. And now I thought you were going to ask me about Terra and Luna, and what there. I always think, buyer beware. When you read a contract or you look into a white paper, make sure that you look at all the possible outcomes, because a lot of people say, oh, that'll never happen. Well, everything always eventually happens. It's just a matter of time. And that those two coins were not prepared for an outsized outcome, where I guess if Ethereum dropped in half or something, it wasn't ready for that. Make sure that if you're getting involved in a token or whatever, that the backup, in that case, the backup token had a limit to it. There were a limit to the number of Terra or Luna that you could have to back up the stable coin. It should be unlimited, because it should go to infinity. They should be able to print as many as they want, or eat as many as they want, in order to keep that price stable. For some reason, there was a limit, and having that limit, as soon as you went past that limit, the stability of a stablecoin disappears.
Yeah.
So,
and another thing too, I
think there are stablecoins that that at least have that as an infinite case. The infinite case is covered. Yeah. And so those are going to probably live a lot longer than the ones that have some sort of a limit to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I look at them all as a great bridge to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's the key point. And those stable coins like UST, or so-called algorithmic stable coins, are actually we're a small part of the market. The majority of stable coins are backed dollar for dollar by assets either held in a financial institution or in a contract that's transparent and auditable, and you can see for sure that the collateral is there. There's a question here: with a finite number of 21 million coins, how can Bitcoin become the global ecosystem on its own? I would think that the supply is too small. Thoughts? Well, I think I can answer that, which is that Bitcoin is infinitely divisible, right? So the 21 million is a cap on supply, but it's an arbitrary number for the number of units, right? Because it's divisible down to a Satoshi, which is about 1/100th of a penny. So all the 21 million Bitcoins could be worth $100 trillion. It could be worth sort of the value of money, and we could still use it as a medium of exchange. I think this person must have missed it. Are you still sticking to your Bitcoin prediction of 250,000 by late 2022 or 2023? I think the answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
And then someone asked, what are timelines for all predictions, knowing you don't have a crystal ball? Well, I think the price prediction, that's one that we've got answered. What about some of these other ones that you're talking about? Changes to business processes, accounting, central banks, all that stuff. When do you see this all happening, Tim?
Well, my time horizon, I'm a venture capitalist, and I get to meet entrepreneurs who are talking about the future all the time, and their time horizon is usually 5 to 10 years out, and so I get a window on what the world might look like in 5 to 10 years. So I guess that is usually the time horizon I'm speaking in, is 5 to 10 years out, because I think a lot of people would say, oh, this is crazy talk, because they're looking at the world as it is today. I'm looking at the world as it might likely be in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of speaking in different languages. My view of the world is really colored by these amazing entrepreneurs who come in, and I visit with 8 new entrepreneurs a day, something like that, on average. And I get a chance to sort of see what their vision is and share their vision. And when I do, I get a picture of the world, and then I start putting those things together, and then I come up with theories that I project out. And usually that attracts more entrepreneurs to me who are trying to accomplish similar things. So it can be self-fulfilling. It can also be, in the case of my last prediction, where I predicted 10,000 after 3 years, I was just right on the money. And I sort of just put all these little pieces of information together to make that prediction. So I did the same thing 3 or 4 years ago for this prediction. And I still stick by it.
Well, I mean, these predictions are great. But as they say, the future is not always something to be predicted. It's something to be achieved. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are out there doing that. And, you're there funding their efforts. And, things always seem impossible until they're done, right? And I think that's true for a lot of big tech innovations, and even right throughout the years. Tim, this has been an amazing discussion. We're at the top of the hour. I think that's a great place to leave it off. We're so grateful for your time and generosity in joining us for this show, and for all your great insights. Is there a place where people can follow you and keep up on everything that you're doing?
Yeah, sure. I'm Tim at draper.vc. And then you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tim Draper on Twitter. But if you have a business plan, or you're an investor, you're curious, something, Tim at draper.vc. I do get to all my emails. It usually takes about a week. Yeah,
you're amazingly responsive to emails, which is probably why you've been so successful, right? It's like 90% of life is showing up.
Yeah.
Or 90% of success, and being able to respond to people is a superpower, honestly. All right, Tim, that was great as always. Thanks again, and thank you everyone
so much for having me, Alex. This is great.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.